Hi guys, so this is your Prisma Color tutorial. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Prisma Colors, they are very nice, very expensive colored pencils. What makes them expensive compared to the cheaper like Crayola or regular ones that we're all used to, they are very soft. So the wax, the pigmented wax that makes up the color or the colored pencil is very soft, which lets us blend our colors way more or even at all, which is very different from the harder ones, okay? So because they're super expensive, we need to take care of them a little bit differently than we would regular colored pencils. When you sharpen these, you want to sharpen them in the electric sharpeners, and you want to do that stop and start method. So you put it in, you let it sharpen, and then you pull it out and then go in again. And when you do that, the irregular sharpening, what happens is you're making it so that, you know, when you end up with a pencil that has wood all up one side and then, you know, you're struggling to color from one end over here, that's going to avoid that happening because the irregular sharpening will make it so that it's uneven, okay? And you never end up with that one side that's just going crazy. All right, so because they're expensive too, we also want them to last as long as possible, so they're going to end up getting kind of nubby like this. I only really throw them away once they no longer fit inside the electric sharpeners. But in order to make it last a little bit longer, I have these cool extenders. So what you do is you pull down this little lip right here. You can put in your pencil in there, and then pull this up nice and tight, and you end up with a regular size pencil again, okay? So we don't need that right now. To use colored pencils like this, there's two main techniques, okay? There's going to be the light layers technique for when you can still see some of the white of the paper underneath. And there's also the burnishing, and that is a completely solid covering of wax on the paper. It ends up looking very painterly, like almost made like it's done with oil paint. There's really no wrong way. It really kind of is up to you artistically, whatever you want to do. The burnished one, because you're using all that wax, it's going to wear down your colored pencils a lot faster. There is kind of an in-between alternative that I can talk about. I don't have the actual medium that you would use to do it, but I'm going to explain it in a little bit, okay? So let's do the light layers version here, and I'm going to tell you my trick. So the trick is to decide what color you want this object to be. And I'm going to say it's this color green, okay? And then you have to pick a few colored pencils on the lighter side and a few colored pencils on the darker side so that you can layer up. So for the lighter side, I can add a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. For the darker, I can go with a darker green, an even darker green, or even a black. It's not like oil pastel where the black can be really overpowering, but the black is still pretty strong, so be careful with how much you use it. You might even want to choose like a purple or a blue to be the darker shadows. But I'm going to go with the black because I'm going to try to purposely be light-handed with it, okay? Then I also have a colorless colored pencil, and this is just wax. It's basically a blender. Don't expect miracles from it, but it will help you move some of the wax around a little bit when you need to, okay? So starting out with the light method here, the light layering, I'm going to start with the color that I have decided my object actually is. And I'm just using the side of it, going to fill in some of that color all the way in the darker side. I'm just going to decide that the light's coming from here. And I'm going to leave some of the highlight area. I don't need to put it everywhere. Now see how using the side of the colored pencil helps me not cover it completely. So I still have a lot of white showing through, right? I think I can go a little bit further up. I'm going to ease up on the pressure in the lighter area, leaving a tiny bit of white, okay? Then I'm going to come in with some yellow to pop into the lighter side, still using the side of my pencil. On a side note, when you're sharpening these guys, you never want to go to a complete perfect point, only because it really weakens it, and it's not going to do nothing but just break. So I always kind of do it to sort of like a little stump at the end, but mostly pointed. Okay, so I worked that in to about the middle. Then I'm going to come back with the actual color, work that in. I'm really not putting a huge amount of pressure. Now I can go all the way back into the darker area with that. I'm going to take my slightly darker green and start to layer that in the darker areas. And this one I'm going to take all the way to the end. Circular motions work. Okay, and then I'm going to put just a touch of black, and like I said, a little goes a long way. So just a touch of black in the most shadowy part. Then I might want to grab the actual green again and fill in wherever I think the values might be a little light. Coming back into the yellow area, and then I'm just going to take a little bit of white, sort of blend in right in that highlight area, okay? And I feel like it needs a little bit more yellow. So you can kind of work back and forth using light pressure, so you still end up with being able to see the white paper through it, but you definitely have those different layers of the black, the darker green, the actual green, and then the yellowed green and a little bit of the white, okay? So this is the light version. Let's talk about the burnishing. Same idea, I'm just going to apply way more pressure in the final layers. So starting again with the actual green, I'm going to put that pretty much everywhere, even in the lightest parts, okay, but a lot of less pressure in the white area, okay? Then I'm going to bring in my medium green. So I'm basically going to do the same thing I did here with just a little bit more pressure. Then a little bit of the black. Now going the opposite way, let's bring in the actual green again. Now the yellow for some brightness. And some white for that very little highlighted point right there, okay? Now, the difference between this and this is that I'm going to keep going with the burnishing side, okay? So I'm going to come back with the actual green, and now I'm putting in a little bit more pressure. Do all of this again, making sure that I really see all my different layers. That darker green, a little bit stronger, and then ease up where those colors touch so you have a good blend, a nice soft blend. Okay, and then, oops, actually I'm going to put my dark green underneath the black, and then the black on top. And then going the other way, more yellow, and more of that white. Okay, now when I feel like I have everything in there pretty good, I'm going to actually do the burnishing. And the burnishing is where I really press down and I get rid of the white from the paper. So it becomes a solid covering of wax. And as I push down even more harder, I'm going to actually rotate my pencil so that I make sure I'm not putting too much pressure on one area because I don't want it to break. Coming in here, I'm actually going to lighten up here because I want this to be mostly the dark green. So once I have the dark green, I can push down more, and some circular motions will help it look more blended. Alternate your pressure. And put it under the black And then a little tiny bit of the black. I don't really want it to be black. I just want it to be even slightly darker green. So I'm going to come back and burnish on top of that with the dark green. And that helps sort of pull that black back and forth so you have more of a blend. Boom. Okay, and now going in the opposite direction, I'm going to put down a little bit more green in here, but then I'm going to burnish with the yellow. And this using, again, circular motions so that it really blends that green nicely. And a little bit of white in the very brightest highlight part. Okay, now I'm going to come back and I'm going to use my colorless blender to help me smooth out some of these areas. Wherever I feel like it might be too harsh of a jump from one tone to the other. Ew, make sure you clean it off before you go from dark to light. And again, circular motions help blend that out. So see how here we don't see any more of the white from underneath, okay? So those are two different techniques. Now I told you there was a third way, and the third way is to take this and use a little bit of a blending medium on a Q-tip, and doing that will actually make it look just like this with very little actual wax on there. So I don't actually have any yet, but I'm planning to get some, so you can experiment yourself. In your sketchbooks, when you go to use a color, test it out. Do value scale, find out how much pressure you need to apply to get those burnished looks. Play with everything, okay? All right, have fun.